Poor girl pays, baby formula. With last coins, CEO behind her says, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "It's all I have," she whispered, sliding the last handful of coins across the counter. The cashier's eyes softened, but rules were rules. The total still wasn't enough. And the tiny can of baby formula sat on the counter like a cruel reminder that survival often came down to numbers she could not control. Behind her in line, people shifted impatiently. Some frowned, others looked away. No one wanted to see poverty this close. But one man didn't look away. Ethan Cole, billionaire CEO. Known for his ruthless takeovers for line. The coins looked small against the belt. They came from a palm that had already decided what it could live without. Bus fare, maybe not. Dinner, probably not. Heat, hopefully. The cashier watched them spread like dull stars and tried to make them add up to mercy. "They changed the price this week," the cashier said gently, as if the words could soften the math. "Inflation." The girl nodded once. She'd already done that math in her head again and again on the walk here. And before that, when she'd emptied a glass jar of coins onto the kitchen table and her baby had cried through the rattle like a metronome. "I know," she whispered. "It's all I have." Her coat was too thin for January. Her hair was damp with melted snow. The baby in her arms rooted weakly, then slipped into a whimper that made 3 people in line shift their weight and look away in unison. The girl's other hand stroked the baby's back with small practiced passes. Each pass said, "I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." The cashier tried again. Maybe a smaller can or a different brand. The girl's eyes flicked to the shelf behind her where the cheaper cans lived. She had tried the cheaper ones. They had made the baby cry harder. "He can't keep it down," she said, and the shame in her voice was for nothing except being poor in public. Behind her, a man in a charcoal coat looked up from his phone. Ethan Cole didn't belong in this fluorescent aisle, not by reputation, not by habit. His assistants bought the groceries. His pantry restocked itself without his eyes. But tonight, the boardroom had been a box of glass and polished lies, and the air in his penthouse had felt unbreathable. He'd asked his driver to stop somewhere simple, a place with carts that squeaked and refrigerators that hummed too loud and prices printed on paper that curled at the edges. He'd intended to buy tea and bread, something ordinary to remind his mouth what ordinary tasted like. He hadn't expected to hear that voice, not the words he had heard, "It's all I have," in a dozen languages. The voice, a tone he remembered from a gas station on a different winter night when he was 9 and his mother had counted nickels for milk under a flickering tube light while a boy with a lollipop watched like it was a show. He stepped forward before he knew he had decided to. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" The girl turned. Her eyes were gray the way the sky goes gray when snow is almost rain. She didn't recognize him. Most people did or pretended to. She only saw a tall man in a good coat with a voice that carried certainty like a tool. She started and stopped. Her hand tightened on the baby. "I don't know you." "You don't need to," Ethan said. He angled toward the cashier, lowering his voice so it wrapped around just the 3 of them. "Ring it up. And 2 more cans. Diapers size 2, wipes, oat cereal, eggs, rice, bread, cooking oil, bananas." He flicked a glance to the baby, then to the girl's coat, the empty apartment. The bus groaned through the city, coughing heat that smelled faintly of metal and fuel. Hannah kept Oliver close to her chest, the formula pressed in a bag at her feet. She dared not close her eyes. Sleep on public transport meant missing your stop losing your bags, or waking to someone else's hand where it shouldn't be. The ride felt endless. Moscow's night streets were wide and merciless neon glowing in puddles of half-frozen snow. Every building looked like it had 1,000 windows, and not one of them held a space for her. When the bus jolted at her stop, she gathered everything quickly, like a soldier clearing a battlefield. Bags in one hand, baby in the other, pride strapped across her shoulders like armor. Her apartment was 3 flights up in a crumbling block with no elevator. Paint peeled like old paper, and the hallway light flickered, buzzing like an insect trapped behind glass. By the time she reached her door, sweat had mingled with cold air under her thin coat. Inside was silence. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that reminded her how alone she was. The apartment had 2 rooms, a small bedroom with a cracked window, and a kitchen with cabinets that sagged like tired shoulders. Heat sputtered reluctantly from radiators that hadn't been bled in years. On the table lay the glass jar that had been emptied earlier. Its belly was bare now, only a single coin rattling at the bottom. She set Oliver down in his cot, a second-hand piece, rescued from a neighbor who had left the building. His small fists flailed until she pressed her finger into his palm. He clutched it, quieting eyes half closing, as if trust was more powerful than milk. Hannah unpacked the bags slowly, reverently, as though each item was fragile treasure. Formula diapers, wipes, cereal, rice, bread, bananas. And the blanket. She laid it across the cot and tucked Oliver beneath it. He looked smaller beneath its folds, but safer. She wanted to cry. Not from sadness alone, but from the shock of abundance. To have more than one can of formula in the house at once felt like a luxury that didn't belong to her. Her stomach growled. She ignored it. The priority was Oliver. She prepared a bottle with trembling hands, careful to measure exactly. Waste was sin. The smell of the warm formula filled the kitchen, soft and sweet. When she offered it to him, Oliver latched instantly, his whole body melting into relief. For the first time in days, he fed without fuss. No arching back, no crying, just steady gulps. His eyes met hers with a clarity that felt ancient. Hannah exhaled a sound close to a sob. She kissed the top of his head. "You'll be okay," she whispered. "I'll make sure of it." But when she straightened, the white card slid from her coat pocket onto the table. It looked out of place in this kitchen, glowing faintly, the call she almost didn't make. For 3 days, the card sat on Hannah's kitchen table like a challenge. Each morning, she pushed it aside to spread a cloth and feed Oliver. Each evening, she tucked it beneath a pile of grocery receipts, as though hiding it would make the decision easier. But somehow, no matter where she placed it, the card always seemed to find its way back to the center of the table. By the 4th night, the formula was half gone. Her seasonal job at a small clothing warehouse had ended suddenly. Cutbacks, they said, though she knew it was because she had left twice to take Oliver to the clinic. Rent loomed. Bills piled up. Still, she hesitated. Hannah had grown up with one rule: never depend on anyone. When her father left, when her mother drowned her grief in vodka, when neighbors whispered about the poor girl carrying her first baby at 17, all of it taught her the same lesson. The only safe hands were her own. But babies changed everything. And Oliver's hungry cries cracked rules like ice under weight. That night, when the city outside her window slept under a veil of frost, Hannah sat at the table and picked up the card again. The numbers blurred at first. She hadn't had new glasses in years. She traced the digits with her finger. Then, with a breath that felt heavier than her entire body, she reached for her old phone. It took her 3 tries to dial. Her thumb hovered, her breath catching. What if it was a trick? What if he answered and laughed? What if he didn't remember her at all? But Oliver stirred in his cot, whimpering. His need was louder than her fear. She pressed call. The ring barely lasted 2 seconds. Ethan Cole, a deep voice said on the other end. Her throat closed. She almost hung up. Instead, she whispered, "This is Hannah." There was silence. Then good. His tone softened so unexpected she almost dropped the phone. "I hoped you would." She gripped the edge of the table. "I don't know what you want from me." "I don't want anything," Ethan said simply. "You need work. I can give you work. That's all." Her heart pounded. Work meant independence. Work meant dignity. But from a man like him, she pictured his coat, his certainty, the way the cashier had looked at his card. This wasn't just a stranger. This was someone who belonged to a world where she had no right to stand. "I don't have a degree," she blurted. "No experience, except deliveries and cleaning." "I don't care," Ethan said. "I need someone I can trust with small things. Personal errands. You're careful, you're stubborn. Those are qualifications." Hannah's voice wavered. "Why me?" "Because you didn't ask," Ethan said. And then, almost like a confession, "because you remind me of someone I loved once." First day in a billionaire's world. The office smelled faintly of cedar and new paper. Glass everywhere. City spread underneath like a map he could fold if he wanted. Hannah hesitated at the threshold, Oliver tucked against her heart, as if the carpet might belong to a different species of feet. Ethan didn't move closer. He let the room shrink to meet her. "You made it," he said, as if the elevator ride were an expedition. "Sit wherever you're comfortable." He gestured to a couch shaped like a calm thought. She didn't sit. Not yet. She shifted. Oliver adjusted the blanket, smoothed his hair. Small motions that said, "I won't drop him. I won't drop myself." Then she lowered onto the edge of the cushion, still ready to stand at a moment's doubt. A woman with a tablet appeared at the door, sleek bob, precise steps. "Clara," Ethan said, "this is Hannah. She's helping me with personal operations." He chose the phrase carefully, like laying down a path she could walk with dignity. Set her up with a temporary badge, a file cabinet in the side office, and he paused, looking to Hannah, a schedule that respects nap times. Clara's eyebrows flickered, surprise then compliance. Of course. Hannah felt heat rise to her neck. "I can work," she said quickly. "I won't bring him all the time." Pride caught on the word "won't" and hung there. Ethan shook his head. "You'll bring him until we solve childcare that you trust. Today is about trust." He meant it, she realized. Not as a line, as a rule. Clara set the tablet on the coffee table with a soft click. "We'll need a few forms," she said, tone gentler than her haircut. "ID if you have it, an address where you want your pay deposited, or we can arrange a card." She glanced at Oliver and without comment slid the tablet closer to Hannah so she wouldn't have to lean. "Pay." The word loosened something in Hannah's ribs. "I don't have a bank," she admitted. "The fees?" "Then we'll use a reloadable card," Clara said, unbothered. "No fees. You'll get a pay stub for records." She looked at Ethan. "Rate." "Above market," he answered. "And a weekly transit allotment." Hannah opened her mouth to argue. Ethan lifted a hand. "Not charity. Efficiency. It's expensive to be poor. I'm tired of bad math." Oliver fussed a soft warning, then escalated. Hannah reached for the bottle, but her hands were full of forms and pen and the panic that lives in public with a crying baby. Ethan stepped forward, palm open, and surprised them both by asking May. The room paused. Hannah hesitated, the kind of hesitation that holds a lifetime of no's, then nodded once. Ethan picked up the bottle. He checked the temperature against his wrist the way he'd seen in a life he thought he'd walled off. "Too cold," he murmured, and crossed to a small sink by the wet bar, warming it under running water with the patience of someone who had learned to reheat milk on a stove that clicked angry before it lit. He returned, offered it. Oliver latched the sound of relief so loud it made shadows of doubt. The first week slid past like a train at midnight, loud, fast, gone, before Hannah could count the stations. By Friday evening, she had sorted 72 letters-typed responses with Clara's quiet coaching and walked out of the skyscraper each night with Oliver bundled against her chest and her head dizzy from the change in altitude, not the literal height, but the distance between her old life and this new one. Yet shadows moved with her. The whispers started small. 2 junior analysts in the cafeteria lowering their voices when she passed. "Is that the CEO's charity project?" A receptionist at the front desk offering a smile too sweet, followed by a sideways glance at Oliver. "He's letting her bring a baby in this building." Hannah carried their words home in her coat pockets, heavy as stones. One evening after Oliver finally slept, she sat at her tiny kitchen table with her cracked phone screen lighting her face. The group chat with former warehouse colleagues still buzzed, sometimes mostly gossip jokes, complaints about bosses. She hadn't said anything about her new job, not yet. But curiosity had a way of sniffing out change. "Marina heard you're working for Cole now." "Is it true, Sasha?" "No way, girl. What did you do to land that Anton Better? Watch yourself. Men like him don't hand out jobs for free." Hannah stared at the blinking cursor, then locked the phone. Some accusations didn't need answers. They only grew stronger when you wrestled them. The next morning, Ethan noticed the difference before she said a word. She was quieter, sorting the letters with a mechanical focus, her jaw tight. Oliver played with a soft rattle Clara had found in storage, his giggles filling the silence she didn't. "Something's wrong," Ethan said. Finally, his tone neither question nor command, just fact. "People talk," Hannah said, not looking up. "That's all. They always do. This is different." Her voice cracked thin and tired. "They think I earned this job in ways I didn't." Ethan's face hardened, but he didn't rush to defend himself. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "Do you believe them?" Hannah blinked at him, startled. "Of course not." "Then let them burn their tongues." His voice dropped gentler now. "Your work speaks louder than their mouths. You've already proven more integrity in 2 weeks than some of my executives have in years." But words didn't erase whispers. The test came sooner than expected. Clara assigned Hannah to accompany Ethan to a foundation meeting on the east side of Moscow, a gathering of board members who oversaw distribution of grants. It wasn't unusual for staff to attend, Clara assured her, but Hannah felt the unspoken part: people would see her there. The conference room buzzed with silk ties and cold perfume. Hannah sat quietly at the end of the table, Oliver at a daycare Clara had arranged for the afternoon. She clutched her notepad, hands damp. Halfway through the meeting, Victor, the same board member who had sneered in the cafeteria, leaned back in his chair, voice loud enough to slice through the agenda. "Cole, he said you bring unusual company these days." His eyes flicked to Hannah, then away as though she were furniture. The breaking point. The following days carried an unease Hannah couldn't shake. Ethan's words at her door still rang in her mind. "Once I watched someone I loved try to carry everything alone. And I let her." There was grief inside those words. Grief she hadn't dared to touch. But life didn't give her time to dwell. Bills still pressed in. Oliver still needed milk diapers, doctor visits. And the world, cruel as ever, seemed to sense when a woman was already at her weakest. The call that shattered her calm. It was a Wednesday evening. Hannah had just tucked Oliver into his crib when her phone buzzed with a number she hadn't saved but recognized instantly. The landlord. She froze, thumb hovering. He rarely called, only texted when rent was late. She answered. "Miss Carter," his voice oozed through the line, false politeness, barely masking irritation. "We've been patient, but it's the 20th. You're 2 weeks late again." Hannah's pulse spiked. "I told you I'd have it soon. I just started." "I don't care where you started," he snapped. "If I don't have the full amount by Friday, you'll need to find somewhere else. And good luck with that baby." The call ended. She sat at the kitchen table, the card Ethan had given her still tucked in her wallet like an ember. Heat rose behind her eyes, but she forced the tears back. Crying wasted strength. 2 days. That was all the time she had. A choice too heavy. The next morning, Hannah tried to work as if nothing had happened. But Ethan noticed the stiffness in her shoulders, the way her answers were shorter, her gaze drifting toward Oliver every few minutes, as though bracing for a storm. By noon, Clara pulled her aside. "You're pale. Did something happen?" Hannah shook her head. "I'm fine." But Clara wasn't fooled. "I've been here long enough to know when fine means drowning," Hannah almost told her. Almost spilled everything about the rent, the landlord, the thin thread she was hanging from. But pride clamped her mouth shut. When she returned to Ethan's office, he was on a call, voice sharp, and clipped commanding respect through the speakerphone. She sat at her desk sorting letters, willing herself to stay invisible. But Ethan wasn't the kind of man who let things slip by. When the call ended, he looked straight at her. "What happened last night?" Her heart thudded. "Nothing." "Don't lie." His tone wasn't harsh. It was tired, as though lies exhausted him more than truth ever could. She swallowed. "My landlord, he gave me until Friday, or I'm out." The words fell heavy between them. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "How much?" Shame burned her skin. "Too much." "I didn't ask that," he said, steady. "How much?" When she told him, his expression didn't change. It was a number he could have dropped on lunch without blinking. But for her, it was survival. "I'll cover it," he said simply. Her head snapped up. "No, I won't take money from you. You already take a paycheck." "That's different." "Is it?" His eyes were steady, unflinching. "You're working harder than most people here. Why should stability..." The revelation. The night after Ethan appeared in her crumbling hallway, Hannah couldn't sleep. Oliver shifted restlessly in his crib, sensing her unease, and she sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the eviction notice. The white paper seemed almost cruel in its indifference. Ethan's words replayed in her head like a stubborn refrain. "Debt is numbers. This is human." What did that even mean to a man like him? Someone who moved millions with a signature, who lived in glass towers above the city. Yet somehow he had stood in her building as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She fell asleep just before dawn, slumped at the table. An invitation. By noon, Clara called her into Ethan's office. "He wants to see you, Clara," whispered, eyes softer than usual, as though she knew more than she said. Inside, Ethan was standing by the window, hands in his pockets. The skyline stretched behind him, harsh and glittering. "Hannah," he said, without turning. "Come here." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I know you don't want my help," he began, "but I can't ask you to keep working while you're fighting a war at home. That's not strength, that's cruelty." to both of us. Her throat tightened. I don't want to be your charity case. At that, he finally turned. His gaze was sharp, but beneath it, something else. Something raw. You think I see you as charity? His voice was low, dangerous. You have no idea how wrong you are. Before she could answer, he crossed to his desk, pulled open a drawer, and set a photograph on the polished wood. It was faded edges worn. A woman younger than Hannah holding a little boy with Ethan's eyes. Hannah's breath caught. My sister Ethan said softly, Lena. She raised me when no one else would. She worked 3 jobs, skipped meals, went without coats in winter so I could have one. She carried everything alone. I thought she was unbreakable. He paused, jaw tightening. She wasn't. By the time I was 18, the weight killed her. A sudden illness untreated because she couldn't afford the doctor's visit. I buried her with money I'd earned sweeping floors. And I swore I'd never let someone carry that kind of weight alone again. Silence stretched. Hannah's chest ached as if the grief in his voice had reached into her and twisted something tender. That's why I stopped that night. Ethan continued, eyes locking onto hers. Not because I saw a woman with a baby, because I saw Lena again. And I wasn't going to walk away this time. Hannah swallowed hard. Ethan, I didn't know. You weren't supposed to, he said simply. But I need you to understand. This isn't about pity. It's about not making the same mistake twice. Cracks in the armor. For the first time since meeting him, Hannah saw Ethan not as a billionaire, not as the man in the immaculate suit, but as a brother who had loved and lost. The revelation unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. You think helping me will fix what happened, she said quietly. He didn't flinch. No, nothing can fix it. But the turning point. The next week was a blur of work. Oliver's cries and restless thoughts Hannah couldn't silence. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan standing in that cavernous penthouse, a man both powerful and impossibly lonely. She saw the way he'd carried Oliver as though the child belonged in his arms. And she heard again the truth he had offered her, unguarded, about Lena and the vow he had made. But most of all, she felt the weight of his question, unspoken, yet echoing. Will you let me in? A test of trust. On Tuesday evening, as she packed up the last of the mail from Ethan's office, he appeared in the doorway. Not in his usual tailored suit, but in a simple sweater and dark jeans. The shift unsettled her more than it should have. Walk with me, he said. She hesitated. Where? Nowhere particular, just walk. And so she did. They stepped out into the cold Moscow night city lights glittering against the snow. For the first few blocks, silence stretched between them. Finally, Ethan spoke. I've been thinking about Lena a lot since I told you. Hannah kept her gaze forward. It must have been hard to say it. It was harder not to, he admitted. But telling you doesn't change what happened. He exhaled. It only makes me wonder what I've been doing all this time. Building towers, buying companies. And for what? Hannah glanced at him. For stability. For power. For safety. He gave a bitter laugh. Safety is an illusion. I thought money could keep me from ever losing again. But it didn't. It only made the silence louder. They stopped at a small park. Snow covered the swings, the benches, the path. Ethan's breath misted in the cold. When I saw you that night in the store, I realized something. You weren't just surviving. You were still choosing love. For Oliver. For a future. Even when the world gave you nothing, you still gave him everything. Her chest tightened. That's what mothers do. No, Ethan said firmly. That's what extraordinary people do. And it made me realize maybe it's not too late for me to choose love, too. The words hung in the air, fragile and sharp. Hannah's pulse quickened. She turned to him, searching his face. Ethan, but he didn't finish the thought. Instead, he offered his arm, gentle but insistent. Walk with me a little longer. Cracks widen into open sky. That Friday, Hannah arrived at work to find Ethan unusually absent. Clara told her he had gone to a meeting outside the city, but he hadn't said when he'd return. The day dragged. Without his steady presence, the office felt colder. Oliver fussed in